So, good morning, everyone. On behalf of the organizing committee, I welcome you very warmly to the Deep Learning IndabaX 2019 in South Africa in Durban. Before Professor Petrucciona will do the official opening from UKZN, I'll just say a couple of words on the background of the event. An IndabaX is a community-driven version of a larger conference, which is the Deep Learning Indaba. And it was organized for the first time in 2017 at WITS in Johannesburg. Who was there? Can I see a show of hands? Okay. And then last year in Stellenbosch. Who was there? Wow. And a couple of the organizers are also here, so also speak to them. This year it will leave South Africa and go to Kenya. So we kind of felt sad about this because we felt something came into motion that we want to keep going. And so we decided to use this event of the IndabaXs, which is like basically all over Africa, organized in all the countries. We want to use it to actually like have a similarly big format. And this is kind of the kickoff. So while you're here, think if you want to do next year's IndabaX. So we want this format actually to continue and grow. And if you haven't been to any of the events, then let me just tell you that they are really something very special. So it's one of these conferences where you can sit and really get goosebumps because if you have been like to international machine learning conferences, they are often very like commercially driven. They are often like not very diverse. Here in South Africa and in Africa, we have a community that's ethics driven, that's like wants to be inclusive, that wants to like get everyone on board, that wants to have fun together. And I really feel, so sometimes I personally are, when I'm in international conferences these days, I actually like miss this community. So let's like own this and let's make it ours and let's drive it the way we want so that one day maybe people from all over the world actually come to an African machine learning conference and feel that they're much more happy here and they actually like start coming not only as a lip service, but they really want to be here. Well, so the organizing committee of this year's IndabaX, we've worked really, really incredibly hard over the last weeks. And maybe we can just stand up. So you see these other people in the black t-shirts here. And if you have any questions, please address them to those guys. Chris will give a bit of a more introduction, but I just want to thank our sponsors that you will see just now. We introduce you to them. And we have also given stipends to around 70 students. So one of the main things about an Indaba and an IndabaX is that we want to sponsor as many students as we can. Thanks to the students who have traveled very far and have like bared with us in our travel organization. This was really a tricky process to get going. And now basically the organizing committee will hand it over to you. Make this happen, make it yours. So I want to invite you basically to be part of the Indaba spirit, to share like your engaging and positive attitude with everyone, and to talk to each other, to mingle and go out of here like feeling that there is something going on in this country that we want to maintain. Thanks very much.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Francesco Petrucciona, and I'm here wearing my hat as Provost Chancellor for Big Data and Informatics at UKZN. Yeah? And I would like to greet you all, but I would like to start just to keep a protocol to a minimum. The Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg, Professor Marvala, and he's the reason why I'm wearing a tie, because I thought he might wear one. So I have to wear one as well. But so that was mission accomplished, very happy about that. Yeah. So welcome to UKZN. And just because of my institutional role, just 2 sentences about UKZN. We are now based on the Howard College campus of UKZN. But UKZN is a fairly big university, so we have 5 campuses in all, so that we have potential to do 5 Indabas, one of each campus, in the next couple of years. Yeah, but let me maybe just to put in context while this IndabaX is very important to us. Yeah, and I have to confess, last year we also put in a bid for the Indaba, but we lost it to Stellenbosch, so we're very happy that at least we managed to get the IndabaX this year. Yeah. a few years ago, 1.5 years ago, UKZN decided to restructure its whole research endeavor. Yeah? And we came up with a plan of focusing our research activities into 4 research flagships. Yeah? One of them, and they're all relevant for the African context in which we live. Yeah? One is social cohesion, and it's obvious that it's a big problem. Yeah? The other one is African cities of the future, essentially how smart cities can assist us make this country survive in a prosperous way. The third one is African health, and here the aim is exactly to fight the 5 top causes of diseases in Africa, which might not be necessarily the same as in Canada, yeah? As you can easily imagine. And the fourth, and of course the most important one, is big data and informatics, yeah? Which is the one that I'm sort of spearheading. Yeah? And of course, all these 4 research flagships don't live independently from each other. They're all very seriously intertwined. Yeah? And what we are doing here, deep learning, machine learning, artificial intelligence, is really at the core of all 4, because none of them will be a success without us having the necessary skills in these topics. Yeah? We started, as part of the flagship activities, even a very serious training program for students and academics. We partner with the carpentries, and almost every month we have a data or software carpentry workshop, so people that don't feel very familiar can get at least a touch and an introduction to the topic. I'm, everybody speaks about this fourth industrial revolution, yeah? And there's lots of talk about it. Yeah? But I hope that you guys will be the ones who will do it, yeah? Who will do this revolution for us. Yeah? And a few years ago there was a very nice book by a gentleman called David Kaiser, I think, and the title of the book is How the Hippies Saved Physics. Yeah? And that was very important, because in the 70s there was not much funding. The book speaks mainly about the US reality for fundamental physics in the US. And a group of hippies in Berkeley started researching and getting interested again in all the spooky properties of quantum mechanics, Bell's inequality, entanglement, and so on and so forth. Yeah? And thanks to them, we have now quantum computers, yeah? Because they really rely upon those studies from the 70s, and at that time it was dreams and maybe a little bit of smoking too much, but now but now it's reality, yeah? And if you have enough pocket money, you can buy one. You can use them anyway, even for free in the web, yeah? And what I really hope that will be one of the outcomes of this Indaba and IndabaX is that maybe 10 years from now we will have a book with the title How the Nerds, Geeks, and Hackers Saved the South African Economy. Yeah? And that's over to you, yeah? So that learn as much as you can and try to, because I think they hope that the mining sector will turn around the economy. Probably is not such a good idea anymore. Data mining is the future. Huh? Yeah. So thank you very much. I also would like to briefly thank, of course, our sponsors. A particular thank to the local organizing team, yeah? Maria, Mira, and the others, Anban and his special force troop that saved us at the end. Yeah? Yeah? And of course, thanks to all of you for coming and for being part of this. So thank you very much. Have a couple of nice, interesting days in Durban.
Sign in. Great. Cool. Hey, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm just going to go through some quick introductory things as well, just to flesh out some aspects. And then we're going to move on to our opening discussion of Africa in AI. Right. So as Maria said, the deep learning IndabaX is rooted in the deep learning Indaba. And there are 29 deep learning IndabaXs happening across the continent in this year. Okay, and hopefully there'll be even more next year and this entire map will be green. So if you are from, I know many of you aren't from South Africa, so please encourage those back home or do it yourself, do it back there. Okay, some quick stats about our event at a very high level. 210 delegates, right? 73 were awarded travel fellowships to come here, paid for the expenses to be here. The entire event is 74 hours long, which is 0.89% of 2019. If you wanted to continue, we all think in percentages of years, don't we? Come on. We have 19 sponsors. I think it increased to 20 at the last minute. 4 plenary sessions, 3 tracks, foundations, research, industry, ethics, and policy, 2 bonus events, and conference and hackathon, and finally a poster session. So you have plenty of opportunity to engage in all these different domains, all of these amazing speakers across them. The organizing committee, some more faces who weren't explicitly mentioned here. So Amira, James, Annika, Alex, me, some nerd, Chris, Sasha, Andrew, Francesco, Anban, Maria, and Kwanda. These are the people who made it happen. And yeah, thank you so much. Maria seems very embarrassed having her face up and so on. So please look at her to make her feel more embarrassed. She's had a lot of effort. Okay. And of course the sponsors as well, who we wouldn't have 23 travel fellowships, we wouldn't have streaming photographers, we wouldn't have an opening event, we wouldn't have hackathon prizes, poster session prizes if it weren't for these companies here. So I am going to mention them by name and please go chat to them. So the Deep Learning Indaba, who really founded the idea of IndabaX as well, and the University of KwaZulu-Natal, of course, the DST NRF Center of Excellence in Mathematical Sciences, so COMAS, then StanLib, Cortex Logic, Alice is an investment fund, and then the National Institute of Theoretical Physics, Capitech, Interactive Solutions, IBM, Cybergate, CRISP, NumberBoost, Zenio, and Convergent Science. Then we also have special sponsors who focused on the hackathon, providing data, providing prizes, and that was Aerobotics, Data Profit, Zazi Consulting, the Center for High Performance Computing, IBM, and the Eck Institute for Global Health, who are providing a prize. So it's because of them that we are able to do this today. Then some more housekeeping, less exciting than this is where the bathroom is. But please follow the schedule, be respectful, ask lots of questions, talk to everyone, especially the sponsors, engage, interact, share, and absorb the information. We realize there's a lot of content, but these will be uploaded afterwards, and absorb as much as you can and connect with as many people as you can. Drink lots of water, very important. Also get lots of sleep, get lots of sleep. Stretch often, breathe deeply, and of course, have fun. Hopefully we can all do most of those. Speaking of coffee, we have 3 different tracks: foundations, research, and industry. So the raw ingredients, the distilling of the process, and the application in general terms. Yeah, Amira mentioned, did you mention where they were going to be? Okay, so the research is going to stay in this venue. Okay, and then the industry, ethics, and policy is going to be next door. And then the foundations is going to be in the LAN 2 doors down. Okay. Now, I'm sure you'll find that when the person has a very different title to what it says on the schedule. Okay. Then some of you, I realized, didn't know what an unconference was. I didn't, only learned about it in the past 6 months. And so the hackathon, in definitive terms, let's just hack around on some data, get some prizes at the end. That will be explained more when the event actually kicks off tomorrow. But specifically related to an unconference, it's really a student-driven scenario where you can decide what topics are going to be engaged with, how you're going to engage with it. There will be some facilitation, of course, so people just don't put on gloves and go crazy. But we really want it to be an interactive experience. So for example, here we're going to have a panel session with some people in front and engaging with them there. But then conference is going to be everyone just on completely equal terms, chatting with each other about whatever they want to talk about. Okay. So, Africa and AI, opening panel discussion. I'm going to start this off with a with asking everyone to raise their hands, and I'm going to ask you a question. So everyone put your hands up first. This reduces the inertia of asking everyone to put their hands up if. So start with your hands up, and then I'll tell you how to keep them up. Okay. So keep your hand up if you think you are smarter than 50% of the people in the room. I'm glad about this boldness. Okay, so this shows an important aspect that, I mean, we hear for machine learning, which obviously is rooted in a whole bunch of statistics, right? And we all know that surely 50% of people should have actually kept their hands up, okay? But obviously we live in a world of imperfect information. And the way we get this information is by engaging with people and trying to understand what the society is actually doing with it. So with that, I'm going to start with our panel discussion of Africa in AI. So we're not talking about AI just being in Africa, but how Africa's influence and authority is coming into the space of artificial intelligence. And I'm going to introduce the panel now. So Francesco, you met, please come up. Yeah, he's the Pro Vice Chancellor at UKZN in Big Data and Informatics. And we'll be engaging with you a lot more throughout as well. But yeah, he's the host of the Deep Learning IndabaX this year, and it's the reason we can have it at UKZN. Great. You can sit wherever you want. Yeah, you don't have to sit in order. Next, I'm going to ask Chalitsi. Please come up. He is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Johannesburg. He has a book coming out on the rationality of machines, and he's going to be the keynote speaker just after the panel discussion. Benji, he's a lecturer at WITS and CSIR, and he studies robotics. He's representing very proudly the main deep learning in Indaba. So he's been organizing it since 2017, and somehow he still has the energy to keep going. Cool. Justine, where's she? Justine. Well, I'm going to start off with saying that she's a mother, because I feel that's an important accomplishment. And she actually won an award at the Deep Learning Indaba end of last year, the Kambule Award for her dissertation, and she sent through her acceptance from the hospital while in labor. So very, very proud of her. She's now a lecturer at WITS. Yeah. But she's also an alumni of UKZN, so I thought I mentioned it there. Jade, you getting angsty there? She's a software developer at Retro Rabbit and is an avid Twitter user. Yeah, he just loves not sparking controversies, but making sure people know what's going on and know her thoughts. And I very much enjoy following her and retweeting her. Okay, Pelanomi. Where is she hiding? There you are. Okay. She is at Nedbank in the data science team there. She's also going to give a talk on ethics. And so if you were wondering if banks were ethical, we will find out in her discussion there. And Kwanda. Where's Kwanda? Right, so he's an MSc candidate at Wits University as well in the CSIR, doing some robotics work over there. And yeah, I've known him since 2017. So I've told him he has to have the most profound statements, and he's prepared accordingly, as he's told me. Right, so they're going to be like some very rough topics that I'm going to go through, and then I will explicitly hand over to the audience as well, and we'll have runners with mics that we can ask the audience. But I'm going to start off with a very simple question, and that is, anyone who wants to start, maybe I'll start with you, Francesco. You have a mic and you're ready to go. What is intelligence? Why should we care about it? And then how would you disentangle artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning?
Yeah, interesting question. I would say intelligence is everything that is not stupid. That is my definition. And sorry, what was the follow-up question?
And how how would you disentangle these terms, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning? Why don't we just call it all one thing?
Yeah, I would prefer to call them all one thing, because at the end of the day, it's all theoretical physics. And you know, and the boundaries are probably very, very flexible.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Cool. Kwanda, do you want to have a mention as well, if any of this?
Yeah, so unlike Francesco, I think I'd like to actually disentangle these terms, right? I'd like to think of machine learning and deep learning as rather stepping stones towards achieving the ultimate goal, which is to have fully intelligent machines, right? So basically, I think the difference between machine learning and deep learning is just in deep learning, we're basically taking these models and we're piling them up to actually have very deep representations. I mean, you take a neural network, the more layers you add, then the deeper your representation. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. Anyone else want to? Yeah, let's.
No, thanks. I really like your counterfactual definition of intelligence. Now, for me, I think intelligence is basically, making sense of something beyond the obvious. That's how I would define it. Now, these terms, artificial intelligence, deep learning, and machine learning, for me, I think artificial intelligence just means making machines intelligent, being able to do things just beyond the obvious, complicated tasks. And of course, there are many different types of artificial intelligence. I know many of them don't really get along with one another in terms of approaches that are used. And machine learning is really just the statistical and data approach to putting intelligence in machines. Of course, when we put the issue of data up front, what happens if you don't have data? Because much of data is not as available as we think it is. Certainly not accurate data. And then you will have other forms, logic. Probably, if you don't have data, you can be able to build machines that are intelligent. Soft computing is another way in which you can be able to do this. So, and of course, the approaches are quite different. Now, in terms of can we ever be able to, to build intelligence that is similar to that of a human being? And is machine learning the correct approach? I don't think we have discovered yet how to build machines that are, that are as powerful as a brain. Because if you look at machine learning, you need to give it huge amounts of data for it to be able to learn. I can introduce you to someone today, just once. You just look at a person once. Tomorrow you will still be able to know them even if they are wearing different clothes. Even if they go and shave their beard, if they have a beard like mine, you will still be able to recognize them, which might not necessarily be the case for artificial intelligence, for deep learning, for example. You will need to feed it. If you can't, it can't really learn from just one instance. So and because of that, I think we need to probably just rethink the architecture, go back to the brain and understand how it works, and try to replicate it. And of course, that is the question.
You were given the mic, Benji. Do you have anything to add? I'm not doing anything.
You seem to be disagreeing with this, I guess.
No, I totally agree. I'm happy with the views that have been expressed. I think,
Okay.
I'm happy to move on and grab the next one.
Cool. No, that's great. I would also say that I like to let you think, look at the brain. So I'm a neuroscientist, trained computational neuroscientist. And let me say as well, we start with an easy question, what is intelligence? Because we all know what it is, obviously, very clearly able to define. That was sarcasm. You will learn this from me. Because as a neuroscientist, it's very easy to say what the brain does, right? So all it does is receives inputs, processes some information, produces an output, i.e. sensory information, some decision processing, and then behavioral output. However, how do you just replicate that in a computer or in some other mechanisms slightly more involved, and hence the job security of neuroscience. Right. So next, I want to talk about heroes and champions of AI. Okay, and often we hear these big international names. But I'm wondering if give your international hero or champion, but also any local heroes, any African heroes, South African ones. Maybe Benji, do you want to start? Whichever's Mike.
So I guess the way I want to think about this is in terms of my involvement with the Indaba. And when we started this back in 2017, we had this idea that there were 8 of us who were interested in organizing this. And we thought we could maybe find 30 to 50 people who care about machine learning. Like in the South African, maybe the whole African context, you know, because we clearly had done the research on this. And yeah, it turns out that was a little wrong. And with the first Indaba, we ended up having about 350 people, and the applications were double that. And what's been super cool is just engaging with the community as a whole. So, I mean, at this point, as you mentioned, we've now got 27 IndabaX events running across the continent. That's half of the countries in Africa. I don't know any other continent that's pulled that off, especially not in 2 years. And what's been super cool is to see that, you know, I think typically you look at like your heroes in machine learning, and there'll be like the 5-10 names that jump to mind that have their names on every paper, your Jeff Hintons and Jan LeCuns and Andy Bartos and Rich Suttons and like all the big names that have really kind of founded areas. But I think it's not necessarily a healthy way to just look at things. It really is a community, and a community is about everyone in it. And to see that, you know, in all these countries, we've had like really passionate teams like the team here that have been driving these things and making events happen and just pulling everybody together and seeing that like every single person can contribute, I think has been one of the most overwhelming experiences for me over the last couple of years. Just to see that, you know, you need, for science to work, you need a whole lot of people, and you need people doing different things, taking the conversation in different directions, trying new ideas. And like, honestly, I feel that the community, and my view on this has changed over the last couple of years because of the involvement in these activities, but I really feel that the community is the big deal here and the hero itself. And just, you know, seeing like this room full of people that are just here passionate about machine learning is just the most mind-blowing thing. And yeah, I'd encourage you all to just remember that it's not just about the big names. They don't do anything without students and without the rest of the community and without people calling them out on things and trying ideas and tweaking things. And everyone's got a role to play and can contribute to the conversation. So I guess that's a bit of a cheesy answer and not what you were looking for. But that's really how I feel on this topic.
That's great. Yeah, Pelonami, do you want to start that side with your views?
So yeah, I think Benji should not feel that his answer is cheesy at all, because for me, one of the most incredible things about the coding community, which then extends to the, I don't know, nerds and geeks and of AI and data science, is that the community is so free, and access to information and access to knowledge is really easy to attain through things like the internet. So I think firstly, one of my heroes is definitely Andrew NG, or Andrew Ng, I'm not so sure how to pronounce his surname. He never mentions it. And then the reason for that is because even though I paid a whole lot of fees to go to WITS, and I'm sure many people here have paid a whole lot of fees to go to all sorts of places, you didn't necessarily attain the information that you needed from those institutions in order to do the type of research you wanted to do or to go into the industry that you ended up in. And for me, Andrew taught me a lot of what I knew. So yes, he's definitely a hero. Then, as a Black female who will be talking about ethics and bias, I definitely have my inspirations within that field. And so it's really cool that a lot of the ethics and bias issues are being driven by the African diaspora. So we have people like Timnit Gebru and Joy Bolamweni, and they are really changing the face of what it means to be a data scientist, and not just solving problems because you think machine learning is cool and it's the new hip thing that everybody needs to get into and everybody needs to do, but making sure that you're addressing problems that really need to be solved and that you're taking into account who's going to be affected by those solutions and what those solutions mean for the people who use them. So yeah, those are the two other heroes. And then, of course, the deep learning Indaba team is definitely my heroes and a lot more immediate. So my data science journey started within the CSIR with Vukosi Marivate and Quinton Williams, actually, who'll be speaking later in the week, as well as, so that whole team has been a real inspiration for me because they introduced me to the world. And they've done all of this for all of us and for everyone else in Africa who's now involved in the Indaba. So yeah, those are my heroes.
Great, thanks. You've touched upon a whole bunch of the other topics, but I'm going to ask, do we have any rapid fire answers to heroes, champions, Justine, Kwanda, any hero names that you just like shout out?
To be honest, I don't have any names off my head, but I've met people that are doing cool research in AI, trying to help farmers to identify what kind of pests and diseases are affecting their crops by just using the phone app. And these are actually locally based in our communities. Like I met some researchers from Tanzania and some from Uganda as well. And I love the application part of all the cool coding and programming and everything. So I was really inspired that the things are engineered by people from the continent. Yeah, and well, those from diaspora like CC, who has now started teaching machine learning course, I think at AIMS, some of the AIMS centers, I'm not sure. They're really our heroes. And again, to bring it back home, this team that, is part of that is organizing these deep learning communities is actually increasing awareness and involvement from within our communities. Thank you.
Great. So I'm going to move on then to the academia and industry aspect of things, and I'm going to start off by asking if you could ask any company to make a data set public, what would it be? What would that data set be? Jade, do you want to start as an industry professional?
Yeah, so I'm starting as industry professional, but the one I'm going to go for is more research related. So the data set I want made public would be, I think SABC has a whole bunch of radio recordings. They have a whole bunch of scripts, and they've got tons and tons of data, all in African languages. And that data is not available anywhere, and we don't have anyone else who's necessarily recorded it in the same way they have. And that's the data set I would like, is the data set of all the African languages, all the resources, well, at least Southern African languages that we've gathered. The news every day, there's a script for it, there's voice for it. We could be making amazing machine translation and speech models out of it.
Cool. I've also noticed that the mic has shifted every time. So now I think both. Can we bring him back here?
Okay.
And does someone from academia want to chime in to what data set they'd like to get their hands on?
Yeah, I mean, a few years back, this must be like 18 years back, I went to look for... I'm not young, I'm old. So I wanted to buy a house. And I went to the bank and they looked at my financial status. They do something called credit scoring. I understand now the banks use machine learning to do that. And then they said, yeah, you're going to get a loan, but what happens if you die? I said, what do you mean? If I die? And then they said, somebody must cover your debt. So you need to get a life insurance. So I went and applied, and they said, you need to take an HIV test. say, why? Okay, I ultimately went and took an HIV test. So I was very worried about, can we be able to use neural networks to be able to do credit scoring, including HIV test, without necessarily asking people to go and take an HIV test. So then we went to the Department of Health because we were going to design this thing, We went to the Department of Health to look at something called the antenatal database. How many of you know about the antenatal database? It should be made public, by the way, So when a woman goes to a public university, they take all sorts of data from each woman. Gravidity, how many pregnancies, parity, and they also take an HIV test. So now you have this huge database with almost 1 million entries where you can be able to take demographic characteristics and be able to build a model that will relate that to HIV status. Of course, getting that database was quite a bit of a mission, and of course, I would like that database to be open, so that we can be able to update our models.
Any other data sets you would like?
Maybe more than data set, I would like software codes to be all open source, because sometimes it's very useful to know what people do with your data.
and legible software code, not just no comment. Related to academia and industry as well. What do you think? There are pros and cons to both of these aspects, and it's not a. Oh, Kwanda, did you have a statement first?
Yeah, no, so I just wanted to add onto the previous question about which data set I'd like to be available. So instead of having, so I'm going to go the other way. Like instead of having some data set being openly available, I'd like for it to be the opposite. And the thing is, I usually get calls like from strange numbers, like people trying to sell me insurance. And I'm like, where'd you get my number from? So yeah, like I think we need to basically have like more firm policies that basically protect people's data. Like I would really appreciate it if every telecommunications company didn't have my number, like every call center, I feel like they just had like Wanda there, and they call the same people call you more than once, and you were like, okay, can you please kindly remove me from your database because I'm not interested in your services, and that never happens. So I'd be happy if that became less available. Or not available at all, like without my consent at least. Yeah.
Maybe just to follow up on that, the issue of data privacy. Yeah. We obviously take it quite for granted. Few years ago, maybe not few years ago, about 13 years ago. So we were working on designing a chair. You have something called proton therapy, which is used when you have brain tumor. So basically, you sit on the chair, and then you have a gun, a gamma ray gun, and then it kills the cells that need to be killed. So it's an optimization problem. It has to be done very, very quickly, because if you blink, you change your position. And we went to a company called Itemba Labs. Does it still exist? So they gave us this huge data, huge sets of data about people and their scars and so on and so forth. And after a week, we realized that these things actually have names of people. And literally, I thought maybe the names might actually have been from the 60s or the 70s. No, the names were quite recent, and we had to go back and said, please, can you remove the names before we actually use this data? But obviously, the issue of putting down regulations, that once you label data with people's names, you cannot just give it away. It's very, very important, And many of these companies don't do it on purpose. It's because they don't have protocol around the use and distribution of data. And maybe as part of our regulatory framework, whoever is handling data must obviously either be trained on how to handle things such as privacy, or or yeah, something needs to be done about that. Yeah.
Great. Talking about people, the human element, why are humans going to be relevant in 20 years when AI takes over the world? Like, okay, so obviously there's you're talking about privacy issues and the human side of that, where it's not just humans, not just a row in a column, right? And obviously you get these researchers which are also influencing the data sets that they pick, that they choose, how they collect them. All these implicit biases are included in this. But more than that as well, obviously, please speak to these too, but where do you see the interaction between artificial intelligence and humans going? Where do we fit in? Can AI be more creative than humans, for example? If we don't even, I mean, we have our subjective view of creativity. Some people think AI can be more creative. Some think it will never be human level, for example. Does anyone have any thoughts? Yeah, Panomi's hands. Nice.
So speaking to the first thing, where do humans fit in when AI rules the world? So this is often a discussion or a conversation that I have with my dad, and about how my dad's cool. And we talk about how when you are freed from the basic necessities of your everyday, then you are freed intellectually. So if you do not need to worry about putting food on the table or a house over your home, or about black tax, or about looking after your elderly parents or anything like that, then you are free to philosophize about the world and become a better human. You have time to think about what life means to you, about the meaning of life, about what you want to achieve, about how you can be a better person and how the world can be a better place. And I think that will be one of the ways in which humans will be able to fit into the world, because to be honest, with the creativity question, where we are now, it's difficult for me to understand how creative machines can be in terms of social issues. Part of the reason why humans are so incredible, and apart from different animals in the animal kingdom, is our ability to be so social and allow our cognizance to facilitate that social interaction. So I think our social bonds will grow the more we hand over to machines and they can do all the machine type stuff. So that was the first thing. And then I forgot about the second thing. Maybe I'll remember it.
We can come back to it, not a problem.
Yeah.
Benji, you work with robotics as well. I mean, obviously there's some social interactions. That could occur there.
I like what Naomi started saying there, and I also like to be quite controversial on this topic. So particularly when you work in robotics, you get asked a lot about, isn't it bad to be taking people's jobs away? And like, really these days, I think that's the best thing we could do. Most of the world does work that's terrible for them emotionally and psychologically, if not physically. And if you don't do this for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you and your family die. And that doesn't seem a pretty great thing to be proud of as a society. And so I think the more that we can automate out of what causes suffering in the world, just in like the personal capacity of your everyday job, the better. Now, obviously, this means we've got to rethink a lot of things around how to structure society and how to, what to promote as sources of flourishing and value for people. But I really strongly believe that this is something that we can't do fast enough.
With regards to the last statement Benji made, I think we can't do this fast enough. I think we need to basically do it in a rather slow and more responsible type of way, because the thing is, some people derive the purpose of life through their work, basically knowing that you can wake up in the morning and go to a place where you're supposed to, fulfill some task, and then, that gives people, that give people's lives meaning, and to come and then take this person's, automation is welcome, in the long term, but we really need to do it in a very responsible way, in the sense that I think in the short term, technologies like robotics and machine learning should not be thought of as replacements, but rather assistive technologies that don't aim to take the job away, but to help the person basically do the job more accurately and more efficiently. Like in the case of someone working in radiology, like you'd want so this person is trying to maybe look at mammograms just to try and detect breast cancer and stuff like that. This person can be taught how to use, there's this new tool called AutoML where the person doesn't really need any technical background to understand machine learning, so they can use those type of tools to actually help them do their job better, So they're still the expert, they still exist in the picture, and basically AI and machine learning and robotics actually exists to help them carry out their task more efficiently. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Sorry, I want to just clarify. I didn't mean to take people's jobs away as soon as possible. I meant to have the discussions around this whole thing and cause this transformation.
Yes.
Maybe if I can just talk about this issue of automation, because I was involved in a wide-scale automation project. 20 years ago in Port Elizabeth. It is 20 years ago, So my first job out of a postdoc in AI when I came back to South Africa was working for South African breweries. I was brewing Mkomboti, for those of you who come from this part of the world. So if you went to Port Elizabeth, there used to be a South African breweries plant in Port Elizabeth. It's called a Bai plant. And it used to employ about 4,000 people. I mean, this is 20 years ago. And by the way, automation, and we shouldn't confuse AI and automation. Automation has been around for quite a long time, and it's mainly about electric motors and actuators than about AI. So what happened in this brewery, it was fully automated. This is 20 years ago. And the number of people who could operate that brewery, it was reduced from 4,000 to about 35. When it was opened at around about 2001, 2002, it was the most automated brewery in the Southern Hemisphere. You can go and see it. It's still running, But what was odd about this brewery is that even though you reduce the number of people who were working there, the volume of alcohol that was being brewed actually increased. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that whether we automate or not is going to be determined by the market forces. I mean, that's just a basic, If you look at all the industries that we lost, in Johannesburg at Doornfontein, that is where we used to make shoes and clothes. The only reason we lost those is because the South African consumer, when he goes and buy clothes, they don't even look where those clothes were made. They just want a better price and a better quality, So I guess what I'm saying is that unless we adopt advanced ways of production, if you're the business person and you don't adopt advanced ways of production, you will actually go out of business, because the consumers are not nationalistic when they buy. They want a better cost. And in certain circumstances, you will find out that using a machine is much more cost effective than using a human being. So what we ought to do is, how do we prepare our people for that world, which is what Benji, you were talking about.
So Jade, I was worried there that you weren't going to get a chance with the mic taken away from you, but you've got it back. And
I'm not allowed to say anything. So my worry is this speed thing, is that we seem to be developing technologies at this rate, and I don't think society is running at the same rate, which is the scary part. So I think society is not changing, and we still have immense inequality, and we have no plan to move out of that kind of capitalist, very 1% versus the rest of the world society. And yet we're still busy automating people, and we're getting really good at doing that. So the problem is we can automate people out of a job, be like, yes, it's more efficient because the market dictates so, but now what are they going to do? And society has to speed up its transition, in my opinion, if it's going to keep up with the rate at which automation is actually going. Our need to make things more efficient.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, the problem is that this is happening regardless. And like, if we're not having the conversations and we're not preparing ourselves for it, and we should be trying to find transitionary strategies at this point, you know, before we hit crisis mode, which is usually how humans deal with things. Like, oh, something just happened. We should figure out how to deal with it. But now we actually know this is coming, and we know, you know, we can choose to ignore it in a local context, but then it's going to be pushed in on us from somewhere else. So rather we take this opportunity to think about how do we structure society. We've got the opportunity. If we mess this up, we're going to have the worst inequality imaginable. But if we take the opportunity to think about this and structure society in the right way, this could be like the one real shot at equality and at building a better society.
And I think just to add on to what Jade and Benji have said now, I mean, we keep talking about we need to do this, we need to do that, and we look at the growth and how technology is advancing in this singular line, but really it's all the factors of what the world consists of. We need to be communicating with humanity studies people. Sorry, that might be offensive, but everybody needs to be in on this discussion. We can't make the AI community exclusive and pretend that it's going to be us that is going to solve this problem that we have. We need to get everybody on this discussion and really distribute the responsibility of that we to specific parties, so that not everybody can just keep saying we, but nobody actually feels like we are a part of we. So I think it's very important that we actually need to come up with committees and assign that responsibility to people who will then be able to take that forward.
I'm going to suggest that this becomes intertwined with the next thing, which would be education and outreach, because we're talking about society and making sure that it improves as well. And one of the grassroots ways to do that is through education, through changing that. And our president has recently put forward a few new subjects for like grade R to grade 9, and included in them is robotics, coding, technical mathematics, technical sciences. So there does seem to be an African desire to address some shortages at least in the AI technical sector. And so you can obviously talk more about society at the greater aspect of levels, but if you want to address any educational or outreach level aspects to this as well, that'd be fantastic. I'd love to hear from Francesco as well once you're done. Shalitzi. You can start.
To start. Okay, education is of course probably one of the biggest challenges that we have been facing for a while. Yeah? And it certainly won't be just the university that solved and I speak now maybe in the South African context. Yeah? It won't just be university that solve the whole educational issues of the country. There is maybe one premise that, and it was mentioned just now, yeah? That everything evolves so fast. Yeah? But that has been in principle, I think, always like that. You know, 100 years ago, when the first Model T starting appearing, the horse owners and carriage owners laughed at them. Yeah? That will never take off. Yeah? And 5 years later, there was not a single horse around in any city. Yeah? So and that probably also caused lots of job losses, yeah? Because all the horse owners, all the veterinaries, and all the feed producers, yeah? They all ran out of jobs. Yeah? But in history, sometimes job shifts from one set of jobs to another set of jobs, and that will happen now as well. Yeah? But coming back to the speed of the evolution of the skills that we need, I think that the most important thing is that the mindset that, you know, you go to school, you learn something and you're fine. You go to university, you learn something and you're fine. Those times are over, yeah, and will never come back again. Yeah. You know, in my old days, I thought that 10 years ago, I will never use Emacs again, yeah? And now I use it again because I'm learning org mode, yeah? And it's so much fun that I'm back to where I was 30 years ago. Yeah? So I think that the major issue is the mindset, yeah? That not only our generation, yeah, needs to keep the mind open and keep learning new things, yeah? For instance, the best example is, for instance, with my students. When I have good students like Maria and Amir, I like to let them work on things that I know nothing about. Yeah? And then I'm forced to catch up. And if I want to still remain relevant, I have to learn and compete with them. Yeah? And that's a lot of fun. Yeah? And this kind of fun we need to inculcate from kindergarten to masters and PhD. Because people, the basic skill that we need to teach people is to be curious, to learn about things. Yeah? To learn the historical data, no offense to humanities. Yeah? In a mechanical way won't bring us forward. Yeah? So we really need to teach people how to learn, yeah? How using the tools that are available today. You know, when I was at school and at university, there was no Google. Yeah? So there were no journals in PDF form, yeah, that you could download legally or illegally. Yeah? You had to go to the library with your go to these abstract collections, yeah, see what you wanted, and then spend hours at the photocopier, yeah, page by page, yeah, and then you could spend afternoons like that. And now it's just a click, you read a line, and oh no, that I don't want, and it fills up your hard drive, and you need to buy a new one after a year, yeah, without having read anything very often. Yeah? So that's, I think, that is the crucial point, yeah, that we need I don't have kids of my own, but between me and my wife, we have lots of kids of our siblings and so on and so forth. And young kids are curious; they learn super fast. Yeah? But the schooling system teaches them not to learn anything, not to be interested in anything, yeah? And that's absolutely wrong. That's where we need to start changing things. Yeah? And young kids are completely confident with whatever new technology you throw at them. Yeah? If you want some setting in your phone to be changed, ask the son of whoever, yeah, who is 3 years old, and they will find it before you find it, yeah, because you would go and check the manual, and they just play around 5 minutes and they found, yeah, because they don't fear to mess up the phone, yeah, they just know it's just buttons, yeah, and and they find a solution very quickly to whatever problem that they have. So I think the challenge, and that's where I think to go back to what's the role of humans in all of this, is really to focus on the human properties that we have. Yeah? I wanted to say thanks God, but maybe that's a religious statement that I wouldn't sign. Yeah? But we need really, and that's where the humanities come in. Yeah? Because the humanities need to teach us again to be human, yeah? In a world that could easily become robotic or artificial. Yeah? And it will become robotic and artificial. Yeah? But in parallel, we need to find and not lose our core human values. Yeah? And that might lead to changing in society and blah, blah, blah. Yeah? But that will come. It's inevitable. Yeah? We will never solve the inequalities in South Africa and many other countries if we don't do something really radical. Yeah? And everybody speaks of the fourth industrial revolution, but the revolution might be not so much industrial, but social. Yeah? Unintended consequences. Yeah? That machine learning, artificial intelligence will give us tools to make dramatic changes in the way how we live. Yeah? The schooling system that we have now was invented in the Napoleonic era to train soldiers. Yeah? Or 8 to 5 was because industry couldn't shut down. Yeah, but those constrained, there is no reason for them anymore. Yeah? Why should a conference start at 8:30 here? Yeah, it could start at 12 o'clock because it's 8 o'clock somewhere else in the world. Yeah? It's because we would like people in other countries to listen to our streaming. Yeah? So there are lots of conventions that we all stick with that I don't think really make sense anymore. Yeah? And probably a few years from now won't make any sense at all. Yeah? And part of the education system is also like that. It's also bound into conventions. You have to buy the textbook and read it and test exam and blah, blah, blah. Yeah? And very often it goes wrong. Yeah? Because people develop the skill of being good at exam. Yeah? But That's not the skill that you need in life to make it. Yeah? You need other skills. Yeah? And we don't teach those skills. Yeah? Also difficult to teach because those are the skills that emerge from interacting with people. It's other kind of very often now they're called secondary skills. Yeah? But probably they're the primary skills. Yeah? And what is primary today might become secondary one day. Yeah. Okay. I think I spoke too much.
Yeah. So
thank you. I also believe that events like this, I'm sure we academics and maybe postgrad students around, I believe if we could go like a level lower, even lower, maybe invite high school students. I saw this when I was attending some conference in the US. It's one of the biggest conferences in machine learning and deep learning and everything. But I found high school students there and I was asking them, what are you doing here? And they're like, the government funded us to come and be part of this event. And I felt like that's a good model if we can adopt it in Africa as well. Because we can't bring the whole high school, but at least you pick those who have interests. And this means that we have to partner with the government and, anybody that has really nice funding for such programs.
Maybe just to talk about what we do to our educational system. I think we need to start early. I don't necessarily think coding is necessarily the skill that we need to impart. I think logical reasoning is the skill that we need to impart to young people. And the second thing, at the university level, I was an undergraduate student in the United States. Yeah. And I transferred from the University of Cape Town. After 6 months, I transferred to North America. So I had seen the South African curricula. And when I arrived there, and I was an engineering student, they tell me that I should take 12 semesters of human and social sciences. That was mandatory. And by the way, this did not include 2 additional classes on exercising. I took bodybuilding and bowling. I took bodybuilding and bowling. So in a sense, it was 12. It was 14. Some of the courses I took 3 courses of acting. So the reason why you don't see me in generation is not lack of talent. But it was very, very quite important because concepts such as reinforcement learning, I actually learned them in psychology as an undergraduate student. Now this idea of multidisciplinary educational experience is very, very important. And I suspect it explains why, if you look at new technologies, the United States seems to be ahead of Europe. If you go to Europe, I was a PhD student in England and a postdoc there. The British specialize far too early. The last 2 years of their high schools, they are already taking 3 subjects. No languages, So how do we in South Africa infuse much more human and social sciences into people who are studying technological subjects? And how do we infuse technological subjects to people who are studying human and social sciences? And what we normally do, I used to be a dean of engineering, so we'll create a course called Sociology for Engineers. I think it's 2 of them. The Engineering Council require us to have two courses. But that is not the point. The point is that the students, the technology students must sit in a classroom with people in human and social sciences. They shouldn't sit on their own, because what you want to do is to bring a different way of thinking that many people in technological subjects, because technological subjects can be quite lonely. You almost spend quite a great deal of time on your own. I know what I'm talking about. I was a student before. And obviously that culture of engaging, of things not being precise, that you don't necessarily see in, if you are studying fluid mechanics. There's so much you can challenge the Navier-Stokes equation, So as a result, the classrooms tend to be quieter than in the human and social sciences. So we need to do that. We need to do this. When we try to do it at University of Johannesburg, the only explanation why we have to create a special subject for engineers was the timetable. I said, no, just allow them to go and take any course they want. Just tell them that you can take, I would prefer 12 because I took 12 semesters of humans. And then you say, just go and take these courses, you know. And many of the things that you're going to learn, now we have piece of technologies like Google Maps, where somebody has forgotten that there's something called an accent, a different accent, you know. Or Google Assist, which cannot hear our accents. And part of the reason is because these people who designed this were so embedded in technology that they forgot the human elements.
Even in the way we do research,
Justine,
we tend
sorry,
to be.
can you just give your mic
sorry.
to Kwanda as well? But Benji, you can.
Yeah, we tend to be very siloed in the way we even think about our research. That, you know, you're in your department, you don't even know your whole department. You know the couple people in offices next to you, let alone the rest of your faculty, or your university, or the next university down the road, or in another city. And I think particularly in South Africa, we've got a long history of rivalries between universities and faculties and departments. And I think that's really ridiculous and something that we need to break down. And unfortunately, something that with a lot of younger people these days, I think is an easier thing to do. But if it's easier to walk across and talk to philosophers and anthropologists and so on, I think that really opens up avenues. Because people do tend to think in these small boxes, and suddenly you've got to think about societal issues like, oh, that's not my problem. But it actually is your problem. And everything ties together like that.
Kwanda, keep it in the head, and I'm also going to shift into the next one as well, because we've been speaking a lot about collaborations in many different aspects of this thing. And when I used to include there, collaborating inward and outward, my reasoning was a lot of the time we compare like South Africa versus US, South Africa versus UK. How do we work more with them? How do we collaborate more with them? But what about more collaborations within Africa? What about more collaborations between South Africa and Nigeria, Kenya, and like Cote d'Ivoire, like Mauritius, all these countries? How are we collaborating currently? Where do you want it to go? And obviously, education and outreach is going to form a part of this. But yeah,
Okay, so I'll try my best to tie my previous point into this, into this one. Yeah, so as far as collaboration is concerned, like I'm working in robotics, particularly trying to apply machine learning in robotics, and I have to say that finding collaborators in Africa has been quite a challenge. You know, to find people who are working in the same discipline has been like very difficult. You know, like when you go to these international conferences, I remember when I went to IROS, my first international conference in 2017, there was only, I think, roughly like 10 Africans that I could see. And none of those people were working in robotics, you know, and like I have to think to myself, this is a very important conference in robotics, like one of the leading conferences, and why are people not here, you know? So I think one problem that we have in Africa is I think brain drain, right? Where people who have particular interests, like maybe people who want to chase the technological revolution, they find themselves in situations where they don't have places to absorb them, you know, like, so for example, maybe let's say you want to do robotics research. There's not so many companies, I guess, in South Africa or maybe Africa in general that can actually absorb your skills. Or even if they can absorb you, like in some cases, they can't, you know, like pay enough. I think that's another issue. But I find that we do really like the personnel, right, to actually do like this type of research. But at the same time, you find, I think the government and a lot of people trying to say we would like to stay relevant, you know, like technologically relevant, like as far as Industry 4.0 is concerned. But at the same time, they don't have the people to actually put that into effect, right? So what I think, coming back to the education point now, what I think, how I think it, like what these new subjects are going to help with is that you can have like you'll have more people in general who are interested in these new technologies. So maybe some of them will leave, but maybe some of them will stay. And I feel like in effect, there won't be as much a brain drain happening, right? And the other thing is that, or rather the bigger point is that you'll find this trend of where companies have to buy technologies or import solutions from other countries because they don't have, scientists locally that are able to produce something that is basically that will satisfy their standards. So like there's a big trend where companies just maybe some company wants to have a humanoid robot, they'll just go and buy one. They won't even, maybe they might try and see who's around, but we can't blame them for that because we just don't have the people. So collaboration will play a very, I think, important role as far as basically getting knowledge sharing between researchers in Africa in general, because basically I'd like to think the focus of the discussion is basically Africa. We'd like to have more of us talking to one another, and sharing skills means that we'll be able to do more, right? Because no man is an island. Basically when you have a community, there's so much more that you can achieve. And to think things like the deep learning Indaba and other societies such as Black in AI, you can actually have more people working together and basically developing solutions, more startups happening, and even attracting those people who went away because there was no place for them to go. Those people could be coming back to actually come and put a hand. And you'll find that in the long term, Africa won't become just a consumer of AI or consumer of these technologies in general, but also one of the creators, one of the inventors, where we've kind of personalized these solutions into the African context. Yeah.
That was a great weaving of the two things. Back yourself. Okay.
I would like to. So in terms of collaboration, right? I'm not opposed to collaboration, and I don't necessarily think that's the main point. I think we as the African continent have so much here. We are so privileged in terms of the amount of opportunity that we have to make lives better for so many people. We're not a first world country where we kind of run out of new things and new purposes to fulfill. And I think speaking to what Prof. Tsilizi was saying about being multidisciplined, and then also speaking to about the relevance, and then also to being able to develop technologies, that are relevant to us. This is all an African thing. I was reading an anthropological study the other day, and it was talking about pre-colonial African education systems. And those education systems are heavily based in being multidisciplined. So the knowledge is here. If you want to develop things and make sure that when you adopt a technology and it doesn't recognize your accent and it doesn't recognize your face, then look here in Africa, the relevance is here. So I think we mustn't be too overwhelmed by what is happening in the rest of the world if that technology is not made for us. We need to have, maybe 1 foot to collaborate, to learn about new things, but the body must be here in Africa, and we must develop stuff for us, for each other, with each other, and not depend on what's out there in the rest of the world.
So, looking at it from a slightly different aspect, more about why aren't we collaborating more within Africa? And I think one of the big things, years ago I was trying to do machine translation research, and the first thing I need data sets, and surely there are people who are doing this. And it was only years later you find that there were people all over the continent doing this, but the big issue we have is discoverability. So for some reason, we're not putting ourselves out there as African researchers doing this work in the same way that the rest of the world does. I don't know, I think we just should hire marketing teams at each of the universities that need to talk about research and what they're doing more. So what was really interesting is at NeurIPS, we met a whole bunch of people. There was a huge group in Ethiopia that are doing amazing translation work. And you suddenly start pairing up with all these people. And it's really strange that I have to go to an international conference to go find them all. and international, in Canada, not actually here. And the only, that's what's the beauty about the Indaba, is that actually it kind of starts finding those people and reinforcing that collaboration. Because a lot of the problems we are experiencing, we're not just experiencing in South Africa, we're experiencing them in the rest of Africa. And I do think that the people are there, we just need to find them first, and then we can start collaborating.
One of the interesting things that I found when I came back to SA the beginning of 2014 was the amount of kind of information exchange we had between groups. And in fact, the groups themselves wasn't really a thing. There's a lot of great people doing fantastic work, but again, nobody talks to each other and knows about this. So what I saw, you have these kind of east-west academic trade routes across the Northern Hemisphere, where from like the US and Canada to the UK to Europe, all the way through to Asia, there's always people traveling around giving talks at each other's departments. And you can be sitting in a reasonably sized department, and every day of the week there'll be someone from a different country coming and giving a talk. And then I came back here, and there were all these like great friends and colleagues that I had that I wanted to come out and give talks here. And I thought, I don't even know how to assemble an audience for a talk. And if I did bring them out, it would be popping into one place and leaving again. So I think what's really important is to start, firstly, and I think this has happened in the last couple of years, to start forming bigger units by, again, different departments collaborating and getting to know what's happening in their local areas, so that you do have these audiences and you've got that local exchange of ideas. But also, if you go on holiday to another part of the country, I mean, for a long time when I've done that around the world, I've gotten hold of someone in that local setting and said, while I'm here, I'm happy to give a talk. But we need to do this here as well. You go down to Cape Town for a holiday, you should know someone from there. If you've attended a meeting like this, you should be able to go there and say, hey, I'm in the area, do you want me to give a talk? And you start building up the communities like this. It's not all about collaborating internationally, which is definitely a great thing to do, but we should at least be doing this locally.
That's great. It's near 10 o'clock. We set to end at 10:30, and I'm sure the audience wants to ask some questions as well. So I'm just going to ask the final points. Where are we going? What do you see AI going towards in the next few years? And I'm going to preface this by saying what Hinton, LeCun, and Benjo, I think, were the Turing Award prize winners. And they said, don't necessarily go towards the mainstream or what is mainstream right now. So what do you think is the next big breakthrough in machine learning? Just like a quick 2 sentences. Whoever wants to start.
Causality. That's
Great.
the next one.
Yeah, causality.
Any other answers, Francesco, that you want?
Maybe I think causality, but I don't think causality will necessarily be broken by AI. Because one thing that we actually underestimate is how much machine learning, AI, how much correlation models these things are. They are absolutely correlation models. And the only causality that you can be able to insert into the picture has to have some element of observation. But the problem is that even human beings, even us as human beings, we have evolved to the extent that we detect causality through correlation. And that is why human beings always thought something caused another, and later on you find out that it is correlation. So I guess what I'm saying is that as we tackle the problem of causality, we shouldn't limit ourselves to this community. I think we should get people from psychology, we should get people from philosophy, and we should also get people from mathematics to be able to solve this problem.
Yeah, Francesco.
Okay, I'm biased, of course. And I would say that one of the trends that we definitely need to follow is the opportunities that quantum computing will give us. Yeah, and I'm biased because we do it in Durban. Yeah? But that's definitely something that will come sooner rather than later in whatever form. Yeah? And we need to be ready for that as well. Yeah? And this couple slightly to your previous question, if I can add my 2 bits to that as well, about collaboration. There is a very pragmatic argument for us in Africa to collaborate together as much as we can, yeah? And that is just funding. Yeah? We can't, we are speaking machine learning, artificial, and we have in mind mainly software, yeah? But there is hardware behind it, yeah? And we already completely missed out on the semiconductor revolution. There is no semiconductor industry in Africa, and there will probably never be. Yeah? And now we have the opportunity, for instance, with quantum technology. There's another kind of industrial revolution coming up, yeah? Which is still in a fluid state of affairs. Yeah? And maybe we have a chance to put our foot in that door, yeah? And develop our local next generation kind of hardware. Yeah? And to do that, we need funding. Yeah? Companies, you don't even have to mention the Googles and Facebooks of the world, just a traditional German car maker, Volkswagen, has research budgets that are 10 times the whole of South Africa research budget. Yeah? And we need to compete with them. And none of us can do it on its own. Yeah? None of us has the means. It's powers and powers of 10 difference in available funding. Yeah? Cool.
Yeah. So I think, so I agree with the rest of the panel on the fact that standard pattern recognition is basically, in the bag, like we have that nicely working. Then the next step is to basically try and work on causal modeling, where we try to basically ask the question why something is. But I think something that maybe in the background and is being left out of the discussion, which is also important, is transfer learning, right? So basically, I think it's something that we haven't got right quite yet. And transfer learning is all about trying to reuse past solutions to problems. Like, for example, if you use machine learning to learn some task, let it be a classification task, like can you now use the fact that you know how to recognize and identify those different things in a different setting, so computer vision has done this well, but for other complex environments, like for example in robotics, right, this is still like a work in progress, in reinforcement learning, still basically open research to say how do we like human beings, right, reuse the knowledge that we've already gathered through trying to learn other solutions. So because if you think about it, humans learn, like they have their entire lifetime, so for example, some of us are wiser, for example, Professor Chilitsi there, for having existed longer, so it's essentially like you accumulate all this knowledge over time, right? And we would obviously like AI to actually have the same attribute where you not only learn one particular solution, one particular instance, but you'd like your solutions to actually build up, like you'd like your agents to actually get better over time, like improve those solutions and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to open it up for audience questions.
The topic of online learning came up earlier in the panel discussion, and my question is mainly to the folks from academia. Are universities still relevant to teaching these kind of materials when I can go online, I can get the top experts in the world lecturing on the topics, I can have it whenever I want, and I can have it for a fraction of the cost? So are universities still relevant? And then onto the industry folks, would you hire people that didn't have any formal university qualifications and just had online training?
Can you also say your name and affiliation?
Yes, my name is Ashley Gritzman and I'm from IBM Research in Joburg.
Fantastic, thank you. Any panelists want to dive in?
Can I answer the academia part? At universities, as I mentioned before, we also speak a lot of fourth industrial revolution and blah, 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 yeah? But we need to look inwards and do it on ourselves, yeah? And use all these tools to stay relevant. There are studies of serious people that claim that in 10 years from now, 50% of colleges in the US will be bankrupt, yeah, because of online education, yeah? And that can happen to us as well, yeah? What the magic formula is to remain relevant, I don't know, yeah? But it will be to make use the tools that threaten us to our advantage, yeah? And there's lots of blended learning and things like that will assist us. But again, I think at the end of the day, what will help us is the human element, yeah? That any online system will never be able to give you, yeah?
I just want to add to that. I agree with that, but I think we already use a lot of these So, for example, my research students often I recommend they go and take several online courses when they start their degrees, and I think it's a really nice way to bootstrap into a new area. But I really think part of the value of being in a university environment should be that there's a group of people, and that, as you say, the human element of working together, brainstorming, and taking this as a nexus of a whole lot of different ideas and ways of thinking that come together to think about the various problems you're working on. And to me, that's really the big value, is that community aspect that you have in person at the university.
Great. Pinami wanted to say as well.
Talking about university relevance, I think we were speaking earlier about how society needs to move in the same direction or at the same speed as technological growth, right? There's a initiative, I think it's in Rwanda, where they are doing like micro universities. So it's not this huge, big institution that everybody attends. There are these small micro universities that are accessible to people. They don't have to travel far to go to them. And they're using online tools to do their learning. And they're facilitated by official, well-trained professionals. But the system's working incredibly well. You're able to communicate to so many more people, educate so many more people in a more conducive environment that is comfortable to the different demographics of the region. So I think that it's a really important question, because I don't think universities as they are now are sustainable in terms of where we're going in the future. Having said that, though, if you look at how the larger companies at the moment are screening for applicants, they're using automatic CV processing tools, and yeah, they are. I was rejected by a number of them because my qualification doesn't necessarily match what I study. And the problem with that is these models, because they're not understanding the context of where we are currently, they specifically look for what kind of university degree you have. So if you don't have what they're looking for, then you get kicked out on the first or second selection process of what the CV screening process is. So then again, I think we need to look to industry and make sure that they too are moving along with society in terms of the way the universities are distributed, in terms of how people are educating themselves and not relying on universities. And yeah, just making sure that the technical revolution is not just about us developing technologies, but about how the rest of society is adapting to that technological change.
Cool. Justine, did you have one?
Actually, I think this is the fear we had before the online thing coming on board. People are like, oh, it's going to make the whole university system irrelevant. But we are so many years down the road, and it has changed the way the lecturers are interacting with the students, because you have to literally prepare well, because the students are more informed. And I believe this is good for a transforming society. These things interacting, they somehow help you to grow and improve with time. Just like AI, we're saying it will take away the jobs, but how sure are you that it might actually just help us to be better humans, that is, if it's well guided. So it's just a matter of just getting the advantages that we can get from each and every platform, and they would literally interact well to bring or to fine-tune the system, and we have literally a better learning experience, or a better whatever. If I'm the lecturer, then I'll have a better teaching experience, and as a learner, then you have a better learning experience because of the multiple platforms that you interact with.
Great, excellent question, Ashley. We had a question here as well. Please name, affiliation. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Asad Jiwa. I'm a master's student at UKZN. I was very interested in the part where you guys were talking about how the technologies are advancing very quickly, but society is like falling behind. And I was just interested in finding your guys' opinion. I find like it's very important as researchers to acknowledge that, but how can that translate? How would you guys see what can be done to actually translate that into action? Like you spoke a little bit about forming committees and find your cross collaboration and not being exclusive only in AI, but how can you translate from just simply having discussions to actually making those societal changes and making sure that we aren't just talking about them and society is is we can try and make sure that society we do help make it move forward. Thanks.
Yeah, great question.
Well, I mean, I think that the difference between this technological revolution and the one before, it seems the distance between technological development and people adapting to it is bigger than before. So what you're going to see is that the workplace is going to change much more quickly than we can be able to adapt to this. Now, if we automate too quickly and people are out of their jobs, then the aggregate demand, for those of you who know economics, demand and supply, the aggregate demand is going to fall. Now, because people will just simply won't have money to buy the goods that are being produced. And the whole economic system in which we live in actually quite depends heavily on aggregate demand. So now, what are we going to do about it? Some of the suggestions that have been put forward is the issue of universal basic income. I think I heard that from Elon Musk. But universal basic income is an old concept that was introduced by an American revolutionary person called Thomas Paine. Now, where are you going to get the money to be able to offer that? Because studies are showing that the migration of people from the workforce is going to reduce tax collection. And of course, Bill Gates has suggested that maybe we should start taxing robots in order to maintain tax collection. The problem is that we don't know what is a robot and what is not. How do you decouple the robotic features of Microsoft Word? Because there is robotic features. In the 90s, I was there. I know what I'm talking about. You would go to companies and you'll have these people who are employed to just look at your grammar and spelling. Companies will have that, Of course, now Microsoft Word has robotic feature that is able to do that, So how do you decouple a normal asset from a robotic asset? Difficult, So I think societies that are much more state-led are going to survive this era. I've spent quite a great deal of time in China. Much more than I'm supposed to. Last year I went there 5 times. So, and what I have seen there is that it's a capitalist system, but it's a state-led capitalist system, And because of that, I think it has much more leverage in terms of introducing things like universal basic income than just a market-based capitalist system. So I guess what I'm saying is that these are difficult questions. There are no answers. In fact, we are looking at you for answers. These are your questions. These are questions of your time, and we'll be looking forward to reading your ideas on how we are going to untangle that.
Well, Planomi, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Well, I think us as technical people, I'm not going to limit our capabilities, but our main focus on technical solutions, right? So there is a whole community out there, for example, developing things like Python packages for you to check your ethics and your bias within the systems that you create. And if we're able to do that with other kinds of issues related to the technology we create, then us as technical people are enabling the public and enabling the users of our technologies to really understand what the implications of that are. If Instagram came with a warning like has this much rate of addiction or whatever and will influence your self-confidence and blah, 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 if it came with all that kind of things, then users would be able to educate themselves in terms of the technologies they use. That's the first thing. The second thing, though, is that I think, for example, conferences like this should include all the people who will then move on to be able to make these decisions. So we should have politics majors in here. We should have humanities majors, because these are the people who create the policies that then govern the technologies that we use and we create. And if they're not involved in this discussion, and if we don't get them young, then we'll end up in cases like where Mark Zuckerberg is trying to explain how you can't access your emails within Messenger to Congress in the US. Like, really. So we really need to get everybody into the conversation at conferences like this. Your friends should not all just be tech people. And yeah, that's, I think, how we can change it.
I think we're going to go to the next question, Kwanda.
Okay,
Unless you can do it in one sentence.
It's a
Okay, great.
tiny point, right? So I think this ties into this other question which was asked about why universities are still relevant. And I feel like, for me, personally speaking, university has definitely given me a platform to actually make friends with a lot of people who are working in different disciplines. And through them, I've actually learned a bit of what they're doing. You know, I have friends who are lawyers, you know, people doing medicine, you know, and also some friends who are doing, you know, humanities and all of that. And I feel like getting that type of thing through an online platform is definitely more difficult. Yeah.
Talking about technology, and then also Chalitsi said these aren't or answerable. Here's a question using technology. It says, what is the fourth industrial revolution? And this speaks to a whole bunch of buzzwords that a lot of us are very comfortable with, but some people here may be less comfortable with.
Well, as the deputy chair of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission, but I'm going to cover this in my talk next.
Okay.
Next
Should
time,
we?
so
Okay. Then you don't need to answer it now. I'd rather spend time on something else, and I'll then do another one. How do the governments get involved? And then after this, I'll do some more in-person audience questions as well.
I think we have to be, as a community, we have to be in government. We have to be in. We certainly have to be in government, and this is quite seriously, you know. I have spent quite a great deal of time in China. I have been very impressed by their politicians. So if you look at their current president, he's a chemical engineer. The one before him, his name was Hu Jintao. He was a civil engineer. If you look, the one before that one, he was an electrical engineer. Now, you know, and how did it come about? China has somebody called Deng Xiaoping. This is the person who is responsible for the modernization of China. He said, no, now that we are industrializing, the people who should become our leaders must look like people whom, if you give them a factory, they will be able to run it, so that they can be able to give confidence to people. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we don't have enough technical people in government. If you go to our South African Parliament, and I have been to the Portfolio Committee on Science and Technology, you know, the level of scientific experience there is actually quite limited. And it will be limited as long as you, especially the young people, shy away from things that are embedded at the coal face of society. If we look at our SLCs, I don't know how your SLC is composed here, but what I have seen is that those cum laude students don't seem to be there, you know. You know, in fact, when I became a vice chancellor, and they said that unless you have not repeated a course, you cannot participate as a leader of the SLC. People who thought I was being an elite, you know. But I think we should just be involved. We should be in government. We should go and present in government. We should write. Writing is very, very important. Especially for the public. Newspaper articles, you know, you should write. You know, you should write op-eds. Your opinions on this matter must actually be reflected on our newspapers. So my answer is that you know, be involved.
Yeah, we have a community. We can be more vocal about it.
Great. Any other ones? You don't have to. I'm just saying. Okay, great. No pressure. Question at the back. Yeah, name, affiliation, and question.
Hi, I'm Clinton Reddy. I'm from Stanlip in Johannesburg.
Okay.
I have a number of questions, to be honest with you.
Okay, can we limit it to one question, please?
I'll try and summarize it because it all goes down to the outreach and also the learning part of the whole idea of AI. As a business, we are constantly struck down by the integration between universities and the job. And it's quite interesting with all of these great ideas, but we also look at the world and how it's changing from a job aspect, which is consulting. These days, you find many consultants and less permanent employees. As a university, are you looking at some type of department of consulting where you can use your students to integrate into the business aspect in a way of looking at projects that you could actually help business at a lower cost and also gaining experience for your students to integrate into the business? Because I do find the technical aspect is very, very important, but the business IQ is as much important as well. Because what actually happens, the student comes in and he only does the technicality, but not the business IQ. And that's very important for the follow-through and the outcome for the business. So is the university looking at something to partner with these companies, but initiate a proper structural environment for the company to buy into? As much as we want government to intervene, right? There are SMEs also in need, but don't have the finances. And using this from a university aspect could possibly be the breakthrough.
Great.
That's how I see it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, anyone from the university or anyone who has experience from industry at the university previous?
Yeah. No, I think, again, this is the same thing. I personally have been quite involved in industry. I have gone to address all the board of banks, excluding Stanlip, unfortunately. So, and also, we need to reveal what we are doing as universities. Because some of these things is because industry just does not trust us. When I came back to South Africa in 2001, every time, and I did a PhD in artificial intelligence, neural networks, then that's what we used to call it. Every time I used to try to even open doors, nobody was interested to listen to it. It was only after the economists started talking about it that people started becoming interested, which basically means that we don't have the confidence to explore ideas. Jax, maybe you can also comment, because Jax is the person who formed the first AI startup in South Africa 22 years ago.
It was 1998, sometimes Google started.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, when I was at South African Breweries, they came and did a project for us of using AI to do quite fun stuff. So we need to be there. The industry must come to our industrial advisory boards. We should, whenever we have open forums, they should come, we should invite them. So we need to interact. We are thinking about introducing industry fellows, where every now and then we get people to come and spend time at our university to see what is actually going on. Currently, we have people from APSA who are spending time with people at our university who are working on machine learning to see what they can be able to learn. And also, when our academics do sabbaticals, they should, Benji, you shouldn't be thinking about going to another university. You should also be thinking about going to Standard Bank and spending a year there on sabbatical. It's very, very important, because it gives you a perspective on the problems that require to be solved.
Great. So in the sense of time, I'm going to have a final question, which I thought was really good, from the internet. And yeah, unfortunately, this will be the final one. Much as we'd like to have the panel for the next 3.5 days, just continue. We're going to stop it after this. So I'll read it out for the panelists. So it says, with regards to decolonialization, one aspect is seeing value in the information coming from Africa. How should we, in the machine learning field, help others see value in Africa's machine learning research and outputs?
Cool. So I'm going to take that one. We should talk about it more. And the same, if you go to look at Google, if you look at DeepMind, you look at these big companies, you look at these big universities, they have websites, they have videos, they have Twitter accounts, they promote each other. They write articles about each other's research in a general in a way that the community can understand, in a way that they'll often write something in a way that someone from industry could come see the value in it. So it doesn't have to be hyper technical. It's not in a paper somewhere. So that's the one part. The other part is publishing internationally, and I think it's hard, but from a funding aspect, is that we tend to publish in African journals, and then the knowledge just stays within us, and then the world doesn't see it. But as soon as you start saying, hey, instead of me publishing at the conference down the road this time, let me try for NeurIPS, or let me try for one of the big conferences. And in that way, you create visibility and trust. So I think that's the one. And the other is, let's just talk more about it. Let's each research group have their beautiful website. That's like Google's, where we have articles. Let's, if you've got a friend doing something awesome, like let's interview them. Let's do a blog post. Let's start a podcast about African ML. Let's start a Medium publication. Let's do that. And in that way, people start taking us seriously, because that's how we trust everyone else, basically. So.
Great, thanks. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, I mean, if you don't want to address this question directly, you can also end with a closing remark from yourself as well. So we end with everyone saying something.
Okay.
Very short closing remark.
I was just going to pick up on that and say, having been to a lot of international conferences, I found the international community very welcoming, and they tend to say, oh, look, more people with cool ideas, let's talk about it. And I think a lot of the problem that I see here is, we're having this discussion with Nando de Freitas at the first Indaba, and walking around the poster session, looking at all the work there and saying, wow, like probably over a dozen of these posters could easily be NeurIPS papers. It's like the continent just has one giant case of imposter syndrome. Yeah. So, and I think this is the important thing. Everyone's doing great work. Get it out there, talk about it. Worst case, people criticize things and your ideas get better.
Yeah.
So in the spirit of trying to get, trying to market our research, as Jade has mentioned, right? I really do feel like we also need some kind of platform where we get to demonstrate what our research is capable of doing, right? So I feel like, for example, I think in the US, there's been this DARPA Robotics Challenge, which has basically challenged researchers from all around the world to actually, develop solutions for this particular environment. Just create a robot that is able to actually navigate some obstacle course and stuff like that. And then there was massive funding for that type of thing. And I feel like if we have similar competitions, we can actually just, as machine learning researchers, I think, develop solutions for those type of things, and the public can actually access them and see, okay, this is actually very interesting. And I feel like for someone young who's still in high school, they can find out about interesting fields like at a very young age, and then start taking the necessary steps to actually become those things. Like, for example, I think I only found out about robotics when I was doing second year, like properly to say, okay, this is a possible field of study. But there's no telling what would have happened if I found out about this thing when I was like much earlier, and then started just working at it, and maybe even taking part in science expos and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Chalisi, do you want to have a closing remark? And
I think one of the things that we, especially for the young people in the audience, be open-minded. I think open-mindedness is actually quite important. Read about other disciplines. Because most of the solutions to the pressing problems that we face are not going to come from attending NIPS. Some will come out of attending a NIPS conference, but certainly it will come out of understanding knowledge in its totality. You know, biology is giving us some good insights. How many of you here who are in machine learning are reading papers from neurology, for example? I would be impressed if there is any. Is there any who is reading papers from neurology? You don't count. Because you're from that discipline. So we need to be quite, I mean, I remember when I was a student and my professor says, this thing called neural network, it has nothing to do with biology. You know, and if you try to link it, you are just wasting your time. You know, I think we should be open-minded.
Great. Pilanomi, do you have a mic as well? Just want to do a closing remark.
Yeah, so I think mine is in connection to Benji's comment about the imposter syndrome. I've just come back from doing my master's in Japan, and going there, I had some kind of African complex about how Africa is, I don't know, not up there with the rest, right? And I arrived in this first world country, and I was like, this is a first world country. Everybody has their stuff together. Everybody's smart because everybody has the opportunities to study and do well. And I realized that is not necessarily the case. What we have here and what we have in Africa is incredibly precious. Your skills are not any less than anybody else who has more opportunities than you do. And just because they have more funding doesn't mean they're able to come up with as creative solutions as you do. And yes, fine, projects might require a lot of funding, but Africa in general doesn't have a lot of funding. So if your solutions are depending on the things that are available out there in the rest of the world, your work will not be relevant in the current context. So yeah, my final comment is just to look inward into what we have here. It's extremely valuable. There is so much possibility and promise in what we have and what we can share, for example, with Jade's project and translating African languages. And yeah, that's just my final word.
Great, thanks. So then Francesco, and then finally Justine.
Okay. In Cape Town, we have that African Institute of Mathematical Sciences, and it expanded into several African countries. Yeah? And one of the initiatives that AIM pushed forward is the next African Einstein initiative. Yeah? And I think in this context, we need to have a similar initiative, but we should call it the next Google African initiative. Yeah? Because we need to have the courage and the audacity to aim at setting up such a big kind of successful company. Yeah? And to the gentlemen of the banks need to trust us that, that we are able to do it and give us the necessary capital to do it, because otherwise you won't be able to scale it up. Yeah? And what we don't want to see is that our good students leave South Africa, or Africa for that matter, to go to the US, Canada, and set up their startup companies there, yeah? When they could do it here. So we need to create those frameworks to make it possible.
Great, thank you. Justine, do you have a mic? Okay, great.
Yeah, my closing remark will be from my experience. I happened to get an opportunity to visit a research group while I was doing my PhD. And in that research group, they had all the disciplines together, a mathematician, a statistician, and a computer scientist. So during the time I was there, life was really easy. So whatever I couldn't really do on a computer, I would just run to a computer scientist and then the statistician and so on and so forth. And then it was just a limited time. So I came back to Africa and I had to continue with the project. And I couldn't communicate with those people. They just gave me like some sort of a computing platform that I can submit online and all that. But I couldn't, given my background. So, and I just spoke to one student who was a master's student who was in computer science. I just explained my problem to him. And to be honest, I could tell him what I want to do and he would literally help me. And before, I could just look at him just like, yeah, we just shared an office and that's it, because we're all postgrads. And that taught me a lot. After we managed to come up with something, some cool idea, I really learned a lot from the experience. And I was like, I wish we could do that more, you know? Instead of looking at him as somebody who did computer science and I did statistics, I now just looked at him as a colleague. And, you know, but of course it ends there because there's not so much interaction between these schools. But I wish we could do that just with a, you know, I know we share these spaces with different disciplines, especially at postgrads. Just talk to your neighbor. You never know. Whatever is itching you could be somebody's just piece of cake, you know, and can make your life a lot more easier. Thank you.
Great. How's everyone doing here? Yeah, sounds like you need coffee. Okay. Thank you so much to the panel for giving the insights.